cricket sort of just came to a standstill, and I was sort of just waiting for surgery, being told that I've got this tumour or and then in between that little period before surgery, had another scan and they saw that I had a blood clot there.
G'day legends and welcome back to the Cricket Mentoring Podcast. Today's guest is one of our favourites here at Cricket Mentoring, a guy I call as like a little brother, someone I've got to know very well over the last 6 years or so, him and his family, Liam Blackford. Thanks for joining us, Blackers.
Thanks for having me, Skulls.
So Liam, you may not know yet, but he is a professional cricketer with Victoria. He's just been upgraded from the rookie list to the main list, the senior list, for a full contract, for a 2-year contract. But Liam has a really, really interesting story, which we're going to get into. It's going to be some really great messages for young players around his journey. He had a pretty smooth journey throughout his junior cricket, his underage cricket, but had some setbacks over the last 12 months or so, which we'll get into. But before we start, Blackers, let's go back to where you started your cricket. What's your first cricketing memory?
So my first cricketing memory would probably be from as a little tacker. Used to play a fair bit of cricket with Dad just in the backyard, but my first game that I can remember would be under 11s on a Friday night in Teesdale, which is sort of where I started wicket-keeping from. We had no wicket-keeper on the Friday night. I'm not sure if someone was not playing or not, but I remember Dad saying, "Do you want a wicket-keep?" And yeah, that's my first memory from playing as a little fella in an actual game. And I remember I did enjoy it. Didn't really know what to expect, but yeah, absolutely loved it and have wicket-kept ever since.
Yep, so you're a keeper batter, and we must sort of give credit to your dad, Steve, who I know very well. He's come to India, which we're going to talk about 3 times with us, and that no one loves our India tours more than Big Steve. So shout out to Steve. He played cricket, and he was the first sort of mentor or coach you ever had?
Yeah, Dad played just club cricket for North Geelong, and he used to love it, and I suppose he's always had the passion for the game, as well as with football. So used to play football when I was younger too, and also cricket obviously. And yeah, he's sort of driven me along the way, and definitely helped with my journey.
Yeah, excellent. Now, you were selected for the Vic team. Was it Vic Country or just one team in that under 12s?
No, it was the under 12 schoolboys team, so I was one
team. So were you always really good? Like, we obviously you want to be modest here, but were you always pretty good? Cricket something that came quite natural to you?
Yeah, I'd think so. I've always sort of, how do I word this? Been pretty good for my age. I remember when I was 10, I missed out on the under 12s bottom age, and that's probably my first little disappointment as a young fella, which was pretty hard to cop. But then the following year, got selected for the under 12 team, and I remember playing that tournament was in Canberra, and we played 6 games there, I think, and versus Teague, who was in the WA side at that point. Fair few years ago now, but that was one of my good memories.
Yeah, and you and Teague have obviously played a lot against each other since then and become good mates through us at Cricket Mentoring. But what did it like? I don't believe in talent. I don't believe that people are born and are just good at something. So tell us about those early years. Were you just practicing all the time with your dad and in the backyard or down at the nets with mates? You're obviously quite skilled for your age back then.
I think that I've always sort of been pretty athletical in whatever I've done. And then always wanted to get better, especially in cricket. And as soon as Dad saw that I used to love cricket as much as I do, I was fortunate enough that he put in a net at his work, and then he also got a bowling machine. So I used to go down after school and go to his work and hit there on, I'd say, most nights, whether it was in season or out of season. Just used to love going down there and just, I suppose, practicing at that age, not really focusing on too many technical things, but just having fun about playing the game. And yeah.
Well, we're going to get into your story further, and one trend or thing that happened a lot in your junior career was you were always playing levels above. You were always the best player in your age group, sort of thing. But do you remember when we first met? Do you remember sort of casting your mind back to how we first met?
Yeah, obviously just speaking about this morning, I couldn't really remember exactly, but it was in Caloundra at the under-15s. I think it was my top age year, and I was versing Northern Territory, who you were assistant coach for at that point. And after the game, we were shaking hands, and I've said, "Cheers, Scalzi."
Yep.
And then
Yep.
so that you sort of turned around and thought, who's that?
Yeah, exactly. So I had the YouTube channel going then, and you guys, which I didn't know at the time, you guys had been following along on YouTube, and I shook your hand. You were the captain of Vic Country, and you said, "Cheers, Scalzi," with this little smile on your face. I was like, "Oh, who's that?" And I worked out it was you. And then straight after the game, and I was actually the coach, not the assistant coach, but that doesn't matter. But straight after the game, your dad, Steve, came up to me, and he's one of the most enthusiastic people I've met. And he's like, "Oh, g'day, Tom. I'm Steve, Liam's dad, and we're thinking of coming to India with you." And at that point, I'd been to India the year before, May 2018, and I'd put on our YouTube, I'd vlogged it, and I'd put on our YouTube channel and said, "Oh, we're going to go back next year. Does anyone want to come?" And we ended up taking a group of 11 in April 2019, so 2 months after I first met you up in Queensland in February. And you and Steve came along. Tell us what your memories are as a 15-year-old on that first tour to India back in April 2019.
Yeah, I can just remember the pure excitement for heading over to India. Like, everyone knows that they love cricket over there, and I don't think you fully understand until you're actually in the place itself about the love they have for the game. Obviously at KIOC, the facility's incredible. There's about 40 nets, and I just remember getting there with Teague and a few others, and obviously you were there, and then I remember more people came a bit later on, but me and Teague, as soon as we got there, we started batting for about 2 or 3 hours, and yeah, it was just incredible. I suppose just the excitement that we had to be over there, and
just bat forever.
Yeah, just bat, and obviously the facilities were incredible, and the amount of kids that would want to bowl to you or just come over and chat because we're from Australia, or yeah, it was incredible.
Well, yeah, you and Teague sort of reconnected, having played junior carnivals on that tour, and we had Doki there as well. And you three have gone on to be three of our best young athletes. Teague's obviously played professional cricket. You've got a full contract. Doki's doing incredibly well and on the verge of breaking into WA cricket if he keeps sort of performing. And back then, one thing that stood out to me was the love you three have had and still have for batting and for training. And there was the ability back then. We only had 6 players, I think, plus myself and Waldo and Reedy and a videographer there. We only had 6 cricketers, so you guys were able to bat all day long pretty much, and that was just incredible, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I remember obviously the group's grown since then, taking larger tours now, but yeah, back then there was only the 4 of us, the 4 cricketers, as you said, and then obviously Waldo and yourself and Reedy. So we could do pretty much what exactly we wanted and just bat for however long we wanted to. And then obviously the Indians would come bowl to us or throw to us on the sidearm, and you guys would also get involved, which was definitely one of the highlights. Obviously over here it's a bit more of a self-serve. You throw half, I throw half, but over there we could just bat, and that's something that we were grateful for the opportunity, because they'd love to just bowl to you all day.
And it allowed you just back then as a 15-year-old, and Teague had his 15th birthday when we were there. I remember smashing the cake on his face, but it allowed you to explore different things, didn't it? You guys were sort of learning the sweep shot for the first time, and you were just doing completely different things to what you'd normally do, because in Australia you have a 10-minute net session, but over there you were sort of being able to bat for 2 hours, and you could run down and miss one, run down again and miss it, and then maybe the third one you hit it, and then a quick sidearmer would come in and you sort of challenge for pace, and it was just so many different experiences and challenges, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I can remember the frustration of trying to sweep the ball, and I'd just constantly miss it because I don't know. I've never been a real huge sweeper of the cricket ball, and I can remember you telling me like it's all good, it's all good. Like you're gonna fail before you succeed in that sort of shot, and just trying to get my head around that idea about you can't do everything perfect, even when you obviously want to be. You can't, and I reckon that was one of the biggest things in India with the different conditions. Obviously, over there, you're going to fail to execute, or yeah.
Yeah, and that's with anything in life. You have to make a lot of mistakes to become good at it. And you and Steve have loved that tour so much. You came back 2 more times, and the only reason you haven't been back since then is because you have been contracted. But no doubt you're going to be back many more times. India has a special place for you and your dad, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I know. I know. Every time you have a tour going over there, Dad's like, "Oh, can we go? Can we go?" And I'm like, "Oh, I can't." But no, I'd love to get back over there as soon as possible. Go back over there and see all the people that we've met along the way, and
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah, amazing. Now, at the end of that under 15 carnival, there was a 20 boy squad selected to then represent the Cricket Australia under 16 team at the under 17 national carnival. You were selected in that. You had a good under 15 carnival, and the Vic sort of talent managers identified you as a future player of note. You missed the under 16 trial games. You were on a family holiday in London where we caught up when I was over there. But you went to the national under 17s carnival, so you were still selected in that under 16s Cricket Australia squad. Tell us about that under 17s carnival, which I think was in September 2019.
I remember just being like devastated about not being able to go to the trials. I was like, oh, like we're going on this family holiday, obviously over to Europe, and I'm thinking, oh, how good's this? And then I figured out that the trials were at the same time, and I'm like stressing, and and obviously I was fortunate enough to still get picked in that side, off to Mackay in the under 17s, and yeah. What are my memories from then?
Well, I know one. You got 100 in one of the games. Steve was up there, took some photos. Will you still use those photos of you as a 16-year-old, I think you were, or a 15-year-old even, scoring 100 in the under 17s? And Buck Rogers, who's now your coach at Victoria and you've had a sort of a long relationship with, he was the coach of that under 17s squad, wasn't he? Him and Rhino Harris.
Yeah, I remember it. It was a good trip. Yeah, it was sort of my first experience, obviously being in a CA side, which was incredible in itself, and obviously versing the older kids. I remember versing the Vics, who I had played with in the under 15s bottom age. All those boys were playing in the under 17s top age, which was good to play against them, and obviously to play with people from different states was a good challenge in itself, not knowing each other as well, but then also creating friendships along the way, which I still talk to a few of those boys now, which is all a part of cricket, and that's one of the good things of the game.
Absolutely. The relationships you make, I think, is the best part of the game. But the best part of sport is building those relationships and memories with people throughout your journey. Now, you did have a bit of a fairy tale or sort of a good ride in junior carnivals. You got the 100, you got some other runs, you were keeping well, and you were then selected in the team of that tournament, even though you were an underage player. You were selected in the team of that tournament to then go and represent Cricket Australia at the under 19. So it was the Cricket Australia under 18s playing at the under 19s in December that year. So you played into 17s in September, selected to play for the 18s in the 19s in December here in Perth. And you were still only 15. What do you remember of playing up many years? You were the youngest player at the carnival by a long way. How did that experience go for you?
Yeah, I remember it was a bit of a whirlwind. It all happened in about 3 months, obviously, from playing in Mackay at the under 17s. Went pretty well there, and then got selected to go play in Perth with obviously the older boys. And I was just so excited. I can remember thinking, how good's this? Like under-19s, like the step's not too too far away from obviously going on to where I am now. Obviously, at such a young age of 15, I was obviously quite nervous for the occasion, and I can remember going out to bat the first day that in the under-19 carnival, and I hit a catch back to the boxman, and I think I only made 4, and I'm thinking, geez, that's obviously not an ideal way to start the carnival. Like, you want to get off to a good start. Obviously, in the underage carnivals, it sort of sets your week up pretty well, and then day 2, kind of can't remember exactly, but just kept making low scores, and I was pretty flat on myself. I remember I was 15 at that time, I think you said, and it definitely wasn't going how I liked. And then I remember coming to watch you play on the Saturday. So we had the day off on the Saturday. Coming to watch you play. Not sure if you scored any runs.
I got 80 that day. Thanks for bringing that up. I got some good photos from your dad that actually. He took a few snaps of me batting.
And Buck came, who was the coach of that team also, and we had a quick chat about how the week had gone and just about expectations, and obviously that's a big thing. As you grow up, you always want to do well, and I remember this was probably sort of the first little hiccup or bump that I've probably majorly had in all my junior cricket, where it probably wasn't going exactly how I would have liked, and there was a few low scores on the trot. And I think just managing the expectation of being so much younger, but then also putting pressure on myself, and then also understanding that, like, I'm here for a reason, and have been backed to be able to play and have the confidence to go out there. And I remember the days after that, I finally got a few runs, and yeah.
Yeah, and that conversation with Buck was really crucial in that period, just to ease your mind, because obviously I'm really close with Buck, I'm really close with you, and I was sort of in the middle, and Buck valued you, and he still does, obviously, now as the Victorian coach. Give us an insight. We have a lot of parents who listen, and they've got kids, or we might have some kids that listen or watch the YouTube video. Give us an insight into back then, how often you were training. What would your weeks look like? You mentioned the bowling machine in your dad's warehouse, training most evenings, but tell us a bit more about that as a teenager, sort of 13 through to 17, let's say.
Obviously when I was a bit younger, it was more through Dad, and I had another private coach, Glenn Ward, back in Geelong, who I used to hit with at least once a week. And then as I grew older, obviously the more opportunity came with heading up to the junction, or whether it was at the MCG, training. It was probably twice a week before the carnivals, obviously up there in Melbourne, which was obviously a great opportunity, and that was given to us as young players that were coming up in the pathway. So I'd generally be hitting most days, maybe the day off throughout the week, or if not, doing other things, just having that balance. But yeah, it was pretty full on with cricket, and I'd be training pretty hard throughout most days.
So you've mentioned your dad, we've mentioned Buck, you've mentioned Glenn Ward, and obviously I've been involved in your life a lot. But are there any other mentors, or how important has it been for you having a mentor? Because cricket mentoring is built on the back of me wishing I'm trying to be the mentor that I wish I had. And when I was your age and first went to England as a 20-year-old, and I got my contract with Middlesex at 22, I think my career would have been would have scored more runs and more successful if I had someone to talk to and lean on, especially in the times of struggle. How important have the mentors in your life been?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's more being a person to sort of lean on, whether it's you or Reedy, just to talk to about how things are going and how to get back in a good mind if I'm not going that well, which obviously as you grow older, you're going to have more failures along the way, which has sort of been the best thing for me, someone to lean on and just report back into about how things are going and what I can do better to get back to the space I want to be, or have more confidence about my game and where that's at.
Yeah, nice. Now, December 2019 was the 19s Nationals. You were 15. February 2020, the world changed with COVID. And you guys in Vicks didn't play any red ball cricket for 2 seasons, right?
Yeah.
Which, how did you find that? Like over here in the West, we were sort of living in a bubble. We weren't able to leave or have anyone in, but we were still living pretty normally, COVID-free, and the red ball cricket still went ahead. And how did you find that period where there was no red ball cricket for 2 years as a 16 and 17-year-old?
Yeah, in your own little world over here, aren't you?
We were. We absolutely were in the West.
No, it was definitely it was a challenging time. Not just with cricket, I suppose. Just being able to live just a general life outside of your home. But yeah, cricket definitely was affected. Like I remember there was a fair bit of change going on, and obviously, as you said, no red ball cricket due to obviously COVID and all the different
regulations.
Yeah, the regulations, as you said. It was it's a bit of a blur that 2 years, I suppose.
Fortunately for you, you did have the net indoors in the warehouse, and you could still go and hit balls.
Yeah, could still hit balls throughout that period, which was obviously good and more of a, I suppose, an advantage in a sense, unless you wanted to get outside, but and not leave your 5K bubble or whatever we had.
Yep.
But yeah, just one day cricket for, I suppose, was it the 2 years, or it might have been the 2 years. Not having red ball cricket, which was definitely a challenge in itself, and sort of, I wouldn't say challenging to come back from, but definitely something to overcome when red ball cricket did come back around, about like method and how to go about it again, because I feel like sometimes you were stuck in that one way of going about things because you'd done it for that 2 year period, and then obviously coming back and changing back to red ball was
Well, I remember speaking to your dad a lot throughout that time, and Teague was over here playing lots of red ball cricket and spending lots of time in the middle, and just through circumstance, you weren't able to do that, and it was definitely a challenge, but out of your control. And one thing as a sports person you've got to do is just control the controllables. So you made your first grade debut at 16 for Geelong. Tell us about that experience. What's your memories of that day?
Yeah, so it was the first game of the season for that year. I was definitely really excited. I know you look up to, when you're in the lower grades, you look up to the first grade team and the people in that team, and just want to sort of be in that team. And when I got the opportunity to obviously play, I was just thinking, I was so excited and thinking, how good's this? Like, I'm versing obviously the better players of that competition and in the first grade team, and we were versing Essendon, and I remember I was batting at 6, and we were in a fair bit of trouble. I was lucky enough to make a few runs on that day, but we didn't get the win. And I remember from that game, because I was fielding that day instead of wicket keeping, I'd actually pretty much thrown my shoulder out, so I was injured for maybe 4 to 5 games after that game, which was
not ideal.
Which is funny, but.
And so fast forward 2 years, October 2022, when you're 18, you made your second 11 debut. Now, we were thrilled. I think it was just after you'd been in India with us for the second time in September. You were picked to play against Queensland's second 11 up at Allan Border Field. And you made 97 in your first innings and 44 in the second innings. And against a team that featured Matt Kuhneman, who obviously went on to play Test cricket for Australia. Tell us about that. And one thing that, speaking to Chris Rogers about, is one thing you've done well throughout your career is whenever you've gone up a level, you've seemed to rise to the occasion. What do you remember of that second 11 debut? Were you nervous? Did you feel like you belonged from ball one? We're just taking a break from this episode for a minute to tell you about the cricket mentoring community. We're on a mission to build the world's best community of cricketers, coaches, and parents. So no matter where in the world you live or what level you're at right now, the cricket mentoring community can help you. If you're committed to your game and serious about becoming the best cricketer you can be and person you can be off the field, then join cricketers from over 24 countries around the world in the cricket mentoring community. Get access to myself and other CM mentors and experts from around the world as we aim to teach you the 6 pillars of success: technical, tactical, mental, emotional, physical, and lifestyle, so that you can become the best you can be. If this excites you and you're ready to take the next step in your journey, then click on the link in the description below and join the cricket mentoring community now.
Previously to getting picked in that second 11, I think I was in Darwin for the winter, and didn't have a great season at all. I was struggling with how I wanted to go about it. So I didn't have a great season up there, and then played some T20s in the top end series and went not too bad, and sort of got my confidence back throughout that two week period. And I'm thinking, go back to Vic and hopefully have a good season. And then I get picked in the second 11 game, first game of the season, just a few weeks after I got back from Darwin, and I'm sort of just pure excitement when Huss called me and he's like, "You're picked to play in the second 11 game." I'm thinking, "Oh, geez, how good's this?" Get on a flight, go to Queensland, and we batted first from memory, and I was batting at 6, I believe, and came in late in the day. And I remember I've got wrapped on the pads first ball from Kerneman, and I remember looking back, it's probably pretty adjacent, and could have definitely raised the finger there, but got through that night and pushed on to the next day, and unfortunately got out for 97. But it was definitely one of the highlights so far throughout my career.
And then you played the whole season of second 11. Did that innings just give you a lot of belief again that I'm capable of performing at the next level, the higher level?
Yeah, definitely. I think maybe not having that pressure, or not putting the pressure on myself to do so well, sort of gave me the freedom to play my natural game, and definitely helped me throughout that season.
So why weren't you putting pressure on yourself?
I think maybe previously, not thinking that I'm actually at that level yet, but I've been given the opportunity to play at that level has probably been the biggest thing throughout that season, or when I was playing, just having that sense of freedom to go out there and play and be backed by obviously the coaches.
Very good. So well done to the selectors and coaches back then. And January 2023, a few months later, you played for the Australian under-19s, and yet again you scored runs. You got 106 in the fourth innings, the second innings, Australia's second innings, in a 4-day sort of test match against the England under-19s. And you nearly got the Aussie boys home. You were sort of batted for a while, I think, with the number 11, Josh Fernan, WA boy. You got that 100, and you were one of the standout batter for Australia throughout that series. Tell us about that time. And again, it just seems like you took it in your stride and you didn't get too overawed by the experience.
Yeah, I remember the first innings of that game. We bowled first, and then obviously our first innings when we batted, I remember I've schnicked off to first slip, right arm offie, and it was gripping a fair bit. And then obviously coming out again, chasing in the second innings, I was like the same bowler was on when I came in, and we probably had 5 overs left on day 3, and the light was pretty poor, and I was extremely nervous. And there was Joel Davies at the other end, and he was whacking at him, and I'm like, this guy's playing a different game out here. I'm just sort of trying to survive to get through the next day. Then came out on day 4, and Joel went out, and then Tommy Balkin from Queensland went out not long after. So we were 6 down, and not much left, to be fair. So I sort of took that in my stride, and I suppose that sort of opened up my freedom again, like what we just spoke about. Sort of having that responsibility, I reckon, definitely helped me on that day to be able to perform, and obviously batting with the tail, and big Joshy Vernon, WA fella, held the house down at the other end, and I was sort of trying to get him through and take him for the ride. And unfortunately, we fell a bit short. But yeah, it was
Another good,
memory.
another very good knock. Now, fast forwarding to April, later that year, you came to India with us again. And while we were in India, you found out you were offered a rookie contract with Victoria, a 2-year rookie contract, which was very exciting as a 19-year-old. You started training with the Vics when you got home from India, sort of in June 2023. And tell us a little bit about joining becoming a professional cricketer. Tell us about joining the Vic squad for the first time in those first few months.
Yeah, obviously it was a nice period in my life for it finally to be a job. I suppose just the excitement of being up there every day and training and thinking how good's this, like in there batting for hours on end, and also I suppose the physical side of it came more of a focus also, trying to get a bit more fit throughout the pre-season and then hopefully go on to a strong season ahead.
So then one day in July, your life changed almost instantly, didn't it? And that has been something that will be a huge part of who you are for the rest of your life, and it's something that meant you didn't play cricket again, or you haven't played a game since that previous season. Tell us how that unfolded, and we'll go into what happened there now.
Yeah, so obviously my last game's been over a year ago now, but it was July 26th. We were having a hit. We had our induction camp for ACA that day, and I remember we were heading off to Darwin in the following week, so we wanted to do some training. Obviously we couldn't train throughout that day, so later on we were hitting for, there was about 4 of us, I think. We were doing T20 hitting, so bit of range hitting and things like that, and I was also on the sidearm, and I remember looking down at my right arm and I was like, geez, that looks pretty swollen, and it was purple compared to my left. So I've called the doctor and he's like, oh, probably try to go to hospital straight away. So gone into hospital at the Epworth there, and they couldn't find anything. I know I stayed overnight, had a scan in the morning, couldn't find anything on the ultrasound, and then got released from hospital. They couldn't really explain what was wrong, and then I rang the doctor again and booked in for an MRI that following day, and then they could see a mass sort of next to my collarbone, and then further on from that, started speaking to a neurosurgeon about the possibilities of what it might be, and he was going along the lines of could be a tumour or could be anything, I suppose. And I'm sort of thinking, oh, geez, no Darwin. How bad's that? And then I also had the MRF camp to India following Darwin, so that got ruled out pretty much straight away when I spoke to the doctor after seeing the neurosurgeon. And then I was sort of suppose just trying to get through this little period, not even worrying about cricket.
So cricket stopped immediately, didn't it? You were sort of
Yeah.
told initially you could keep training, and you sort of did a few bits, and then they sort of scanned you again. And because I was obviously a big part of this, talking to you and your dad most days and getting information from Buck at Cricket Victoria as well. And I was in England when you first texted me and said, I'm in hospital. I was in Leicester Square with my family. I was like, oh no, what's going on? And then, yeah, you sort of went about your business for a little bit, but then all of a sudden it was like, no, stop. You have to stop everything, wasn't it?
Yeah. So cricket sort of just came to a standstill, and I was sort of just waiting for surgery, being told that I've got this tumour or, and then in between that little period before surgery, had another scan, and they saw that I had a blood clot there. So they were thinking that the blood clot's caused, or no, that's incorrect actually. They were thinking the tumour has caused this blood clot also. So then I've been put on medication for the blood clot, and then had the surgery, and they realised that it was just this mass around swelling pretty much just swelling in.
Now you fast forwarded a bit there. You've sort of had a 6-week period where you and your family had these ups and downs. Some days you'd get good news. Okay, it's nothing too serious, nothing to worry about. And other days you got some awful news. I remember we had a phone call. We were talking about the Aussie under-19s who were in England at the time. And then 20 minutes later, we got off the phone after chatting for half an hour or so. 20 minutes later, you called me back and you said, "Chum, I might have got the worst news of this whole thing. I might lose my arm." So there was all sorts of awful information throughout this period about losing your arm. And like one thing I learnt through this was that in medicine, the medical professionals have to give you the worst case scenarios. So there was all sorts of worst case scenarios. And one thing I want to ask you is throughout that period on the phone, and then I flew over to be there with you during the operation, the day of the operation, and even the morning of the operation, you just seemed so calm. You seemed like, yeah, I'm okay. Whatever happens, happens, and it'll be okay. How were you really feeling? Because to me and to your parents, you were just so strong through that period.
Yeah, obviously it was like pretty tough. You just sort of want to play cricket and do what you love, but obviously I couldn't. But I don't know. I couldn't really control what was going on inside me. So I was just taking it as it came and couldn't really change anything there. So I was just trying to stay positive as much as possible, I suppose, and just trying to overcome this hurdle and get out there as soon as possible.
Did you ever think worst case scenario, because you were getting that information, did you ever think, what if I've got no arm? What if I can never play again?
Yeah, definitely. You definitely think about when they tell you the worst case scenario. You're like, oh, geez, like what am I gonna do? Sort of cricket's the only real dream I have. To be able to do that for the rest of my life is obviously the dream that I have. So yeah, being told that, oh, don't worry about cricket, like all this sort of stuff, it's definitely something that hits you, and you just try and forget about that and hope for the best, I suppose.
And that's amazing to hold that positivity through such a stressful and challenging time. You've got a massive scar on your neck. You're in hospital for 6 or 7 days. And I remember being with your parents when they got the phone call from the surgeon, and they said, everything's gone well. Your mum had the phone on loudspeaker, and the surgeon said, we didn't find a tumour. And your parents were gobsmacked, because that's what everyone had thought was there and what they were going in to sort of get out. But it was compressed muscle, which had sort of turns out. Now let's go into the second part, I guess. Turns out was what? Like what had caused this issue?
Yeah, so essentially it was caused through sidearming or throwing a cricket ball. It's called thoracic outlet syndrome. So pretty much my top rib and my collarbone are closer together than a normal person's, say. So when my arm's above my head at 90 degrees, it lacks blood flow. So the blood can't get through to my arm when it's above my head. And then the next step from that was, following the first surgery, was sort of just stay on the medication, on the blood thinners, because this has come up, and sort of just hope that everything will calm down from there. And
well, just to jump in there to give everyone the full picture, you were sort of put on the blood thinners, had the operation in early September, 7th of September, I think it was, and you were told by the haematologist, we'll review the blood thinners on the 20th of November. And I remember we were chatting and you were like, yep, okay, I'm going to play grade cricket on this weekend and hopefully play the second 11 on the 27th of November. And then that review came and the haematologist said, you have to stay on blood thinners for 3 more months. And I remember that really set you back. You were really flat at that point in time, weren't you?
Yeah. You
had another setback.
Yeah, it was pretty flat then. I'm thinking, oh, geez, I'm going to get back when the season's nearly done. Obviously, earlier this year in Feb, that was when the next review was. And then earlier on in the year, I think it was about Jan 10, I'm like, nah, this isn't feeling good. Like, there's no point waiting. It's going to be no good again. And then spoke to the doctor about just trying to find another route.
Another opinion.
Yeah. So I spoke to a few vascular surgeons about like what the possibility is, and then this is when I found out that it was thoracic outlet syndrome, which is obviously when my arm's above my head that I lack blood flow to my arm, and it more than likely had been caused through side arming or throwing the cricket ball. And then we sort of went through a few options about what we could do about that. And one of them was take my top rib out to allow more access for the vein. And then we decided to go with that, which was going to be more than likely the best option. And yeah.
So they did that. They took the top rib out. You've had a few other minor procedures where they put a little balloon into your blood vessels, blood veins, and they open that up a bit. So where are you at now? Give everyone a bit of an insight into where you've got to now.
So it's about probably over 10 weeks, nearly 3 months, I'd say. Post-surgery, recovery's pretty much all done and back to living pretty much a normal life, back hitting cricket balls off the medication, which can allow me to play again. So obviously I'm here in Perth for a few days, and then heading up to Darwin to play some club cricket up there, and then come back into the Vic setup.
And the good news at the end of all this, which really does show how highly Victoria regard you, is despite not playing one game last season, you were upgraded from a rookie contract to a full contract for 2 years, and that shows what faith they have in you, what they think about you. We have to wrap up now, but let's look forward. It's been a really challenging 12 months, and up until that point, you'd made every poster winner. You were sort of had this fairy tale junior cricket journey where you just kept getting selected, and you were one of the best players in the country for your age. Looking forward, what do you hope to achieve over the next 5 years, let's say?
Yeah, obviously get back on the park first.
First game this weekend, isn't it, for Waratahs up in Darwin?
First game this weekend. But I suppose over the look ahead over the 5-year period, definitely try and cement myself into the Victorian team, whether that's wicket-keeping or batting just by itself. Just try and be around that environment and lock myself in there.
Yep, and one final question, I suppose, is as an all-rounder, keeper, batter, how do you juggle training? Because I think there's a lot of players, young players or parents that will be listening to this. How do you try and make sure you're ready in both facets of your game?
Yeah, I think it sort of depends on your role. More so generally you'll be a keeper batter or a batter keeper. So just trying to divide your time accordingly to who you are in the team, I suppose. And for me, it's generally batting, keeping. So I'll spend more time batting than I would keeping, but then also trying to focus on my keeping also and still knuckle down and work hard at that also while batting.
Yeah, nice. Well, Blackers, it's a pleasure having known you for such a long time and seeing your success, but also having been through this struggle and this journey with you. No doubt it's given you a new perspective on the game and on life, and I can't wait to see what's next for you, both not just in Darwin and getting back on the park, but beyond that, hopefully breaking into the Vic side and becoming a successful Shield cricketer, and who knows what else, getting into the Big Bash and so forth. So thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing. This is probably your first podcast ever. I think you did a pretty good job, and it'll get easier and better the more you do it. So thanks for joining us, legend.
Thanks for that, Scuzzy. Appreciate it.
Yes, chum. If you enjoyed this episode or any of our content, then please do me a big favour and subscribe to our channel. The more subscribers we get, the bigger the guests we can get on and continue to help you on your journey of becoming the best you can be.